Is it okay to use icons and iconography, especially within worship? This is a question that goes actually before the Reformation, although it was a major contention within the Reformation itself. It goes all the way back to the events that led to the Seventh Ecumenical Council in AD 787, and the movement was known as the Iconoclastic or Iconoclasm movement, and meaning the breaking of icons. Icons are the images of saints and of Jesus, etc., used within worship, used outside of worship. I actually have quite a few icons myself, but they are all packed in my car right now, and I don't want to try to dig through all of that right now. I got endless boxes in there, in my trunk, in the back seat, in my passenger seat. It's lovely. Anyway, so the Seventh Ecumenical Council decided that icons were allowed. And then, like I said, the question was brought up again during the Reformation. And what happens is you'll see the Reformed branches of the church within the Reformation reject iconography. Now, there's a question on whether they rejected it intrinsically or if they thought that it was just so abused during the late Middle Ages that they had to sort of wean them off of it to have a proper understanding of iconography. That's another video for another time. However, the Lutheran tradition tended to keep iconography, and the Anglicans and the Reformed tended to not. Now, later on, Anglicans became more comfortable with iconography, so we brought it back. My home parish right now, my sending parish, I should say, St. Patrick's, has plenty of iconography. We have icons in the parish I will be serving at. We have icons at my parish up in Pennsylvania. I've very rarely seen an Anglican parish that doesn't have icons in worship. But very strongly, there's an opposition to iconography in the Presbyterian tradition, in Reformed Baptist tradition, in many of the Reformed traditions. So I wanted to look at the theology behind it. Now, the first argument often is pointed at what many people would call the second commandment. I'll go to that right now. We're going to go to Exodus chapter 20, starting with verse 4. Now, the commandment goes all the way to verse 6, but I just want to focus on 4 and like the first half of 5 or so. Thou shalt not make unto thee any graven image, or any likeness of anything that is in heaven above, or that is in the earth beneath, or that is in the water under the earth. Thou shalt not bow down thyself to them, nor serve them. For I, the Lord thy God, am a jealous God. All right. So, what often happens is people will look at verse 4, and they'll see, okay, look, it says, don't make any graven images or any likenesses of anything in heaven, anything in the earth, or anything in the water under the earth. Now, if you were to take that verse by itself, that would say to you, okay, so no imagery is allowed. However, if no imagery whatsoever is allowed, then the question is, are pictures of anything allowed? Not in worship, just pictures. Are things such as camera, video camera or anything like that, is that allowed? Are you allowed to watch this video because it is an image that's happening? So are you allowed to then listen to it but not watch it? It goes into those sorts of questions. So generally, the more learned of theologians will look at this and say, no, well, you have to take it with verse 5 because that's a part of the commandment. And it says, thou shalt not bow down thyself to them nor serve them. Now, so the idea is you're not supposed to have these graven images for worship. And obviously that would make more sense, that that would be idolatry. So in other words, don't have idolatry. However, the argument is made that, well, icons are idolatrous, especially if they are used in worship, because it talks about how you should not bow down yourself to them or serve them. And so then the question is, well, what do we see happening within the Old Testament concerning images? We see images used in worship in the Old Testament, and the clearest example would be Well, of course, the Ark of the Covenant. The Ark of the Covenant has two cherubim on its seat, and that is the Holy of Holies. That is where the high priest would come in, but once a year, and that was considered the most sacred spot. Like that is the closest they would get to worship, because they believed that the presence of God was resting upon the Ark of the Covenant. So, if images are allowed there, I don't see why images would not be allowed in worship, as long as we are not worshiping those images. And that's the distinction. You can have images in worship, and there are benefits, and I'll get to why and how they help out. But that does not mean that you have to, that doesn't mean that you can, because you're not allowed to, worship the images. Just like you can have a Bible and read the Bible in worship, that doesn't mean you worship the Bible. So that's the understanding. We see in the Old Testament this allowance for images in worship. So oftentimes then people are like, okay, well, yeah, that's fine. However, we definitely are not allowed to show images of God. The Israelites were forbidden from showing any sort of iconography or image of God. And the reason for that was, well, God is holy. God does not have a human body. He's not a creature of any sort. He cannot be depicted because he is the unseen God. So I want to skip then forward to Colossians chapter 1, verse 15. This is St. Paul speaking. He is speaking of Jesus. And he says in verse 15 of Colossians chapter 1, Jesus, who is the image of the invisible God, the firstborn of every creature. Now, the word image there in the Greek is icon. Icon, like literally the Greek word icon. So Jesus is the icon of God. Now, what we have to understand is this, and this is the argument that's made in the Seventh Ecumenical Council. There is the dual nature of Christ. So when we are depicting Jesus, we are depicting God, but we are depicting the human nature of Christ. We are not depicting the divine nature, because the two natures are separate. They're not one nature. So we are allowed to depict Jesus in his human nature, just like we could depict any human in their human nature. Obviously, tactfully, not in crude ways or whatever. So because of that, because of the incarnation, we are allowed to have images of Christ. And we are allowed to use those images of Christ, who has a human nature, in worship. It would never be a sin to take a picture of Jesus if cameras existed at that time. It would not have been a sin to paint a picture of Jesus or anything like that. So iconography does allow for pictures of Jesus and pictures of the saints, obviously an extension, and it allows for those images to be used in worship, but we are never to worship those images, ever. That has never been something allowed within the Christian tradition, the historic Orthodox Christian tradition, little o Orthodox. Now, this comes up to well, let me talk about the benefits of this. So, historically, the benefit is that people couldn't read. So, things like stained glass, things like iconography and statues and all this sort of stuff helped tell the story to people who could not read. And what works with that is, actually, if you look at a lot of iconography, they themselves tell stories. And what could be done is the priest could actually, who's giving the homily, could actually point to the iconography, and I've seen this happen in many parishes, and tell the story of what is written in that icon. And in fact, icons are actually, the terminology used for icons is that they are written, they are never drawn. And the reason is that they are writing theology. They are telling us a small part of the story of Christianity. So the benefit is for the small children who are growing up and who are learning about who Jesus is, who the saints are, what the story of the faith is. They have these images, just like a coloring book. They have these images of being able to know who Jesus is and being able to tell the story and have something that they can connect to with more senses than just the ears. Now, if you're watching this video, currently as it's, just after it's being recorded in 2020, you will know that there is a sort of major movement of iconoclasm happening within the United States today. And it is a sort of tackling or toppling, I should say, of statues. Now, not obviously, mostly not religious. This has to do more with politics, and I don't want to get into the political part of it. I don't want to go either side on any of that sort of stuff right now. However, there have been calls to get rid of what is known as white Jesus, because there are icons and there are pictures and there are statues of a sort of Europeanized Jesus. Now, on the face of it, makes sense. Well, yes, Jesus was a Jew, of course. We want Jesus as a Jew, and honestly, I kind of find the some of the white Jesus pictures kind of cringy, especially the ones that make him look very effeminate. They're just not a big fan of those, honestly. But to be more serious though, it's important to understand that every culture, I think, should have sort of local iconographic representation of Jesus within their own culture. So there are icons of Jesus and the Blessed Virgin who are Asian. There are icons of Jesus and the Blessed Virgin and others of the time of Scripture in Africa, and their skin is black. Likewise in South America, likewise elsewhere. And I don't think that is a problem. Now, I think it is important to balance any such understanding, and I think we have this problem today, maybe, in some circles. Sorry, I'm moving, and I'm on a table, and this is it moves a lot. I think we should always be careful to not sort of understand Jesus as, well, Jesus was white, or Jesus was Asian, or this or that. I mean, Jesus does come from Judaism. I think that is an important thing to emphasize. However, I think it is also important to emphasize that Jesus is embracing our culture and bringing our culture into him. And so I don't see a problem with an understanding of necessarily of a white Jesus or of an Asian Jesus or of an African Jesus. Now, personally, my own personal preference would be Jesus as most accurately understood within his Middle Eastern context. So generally what you'll find is with like the sort of Eastern iconography, it'll be the most accurate. So I try to go for those types. But I don't think it's, again, wrong to have a white Jesus or a black Jesus or an Asian Jesus or anything like that. And I think it can help bridge that gap to make Jesus someone who can relate to them. Because the whole point of the incarnation is that Jesus comes down to us and relates to us and brings us into his fold. All right. So likewise, Asian Jesus, Asian iconography of Jesus helps them understand, oh, Jesus is for us. He's not this person who's just sort of like, well, that's for that other culture. No, he's for our culture, and he's bringing us into him. And we can be within our culture, but sort of baptized with that culture. Likewise with, African, likewise with African American, likewise with white, likewise with, South American, etc. So I don't think that there are cringy ones. I'm not gonna lie. There are very cringy, like white Jesus ones, where he's blonde hair, blue eye, and he's got like that really effeminate smile, and just ugh. But again, we can have iconography within our local culture, but I think we should always balance that with iconography of Jesus, who he was actually as a Jew in the early 1st century. So hopefully that all makes sense. I hope you enjoyed this video. Please like, subscribe, make some comments, tell me what you think rightly or wrongly was said, what I might have missed, and hope you have a good day and stay safe out there.